to Unity, everyone. My name is Dawn. I'm the facilitator for this particular event here at Unity. And I want to introduce to you Dr. Dale Wong, who is, I'm thrilled to have him here today. He is a Hebrew scholar and a metaphysical translator, and he's going to give us some information that I'll bet you've never heard before regarding translation of the first 6 books of the Bible. Is that right?
Yeah, that will be a big part of it.
Okay, fantastic. I'm really excited. I know this much, and I can't wait to hear everything he has to say. So would you help me join? Welcome everyone.
Well, thank you very much. And I think before we get started, I'd like to just acknowledge some folks that are here. I'm here on behalf of Shomerei Hamashal Institute, and we're located here in Tyler as well. And I want to introduce some of the principals of Shomerei Hamashal. Ray, would you just stand up for a minute? This is Mr. Ray Burkett. Ray helps us with the translation and interpretation of the New Testament text. We're not going to talk about the New Testament today. We're going to talk about the Old Testament. But if you have any questions about the New Testament, that's the man that you want to talk to right there. Another person I would like to acknowledge is LaRue Decker. LaRue, would you please stand up? LaRue is the coordinator for Shomerei Hamashal, so if you have any questions about what we do and how we do it and whatever, then LaRue is the person that you want to speak to. And Caroline, would you just stand up for just a minute, please? Caroline is interpersonal relations, so if we say something that's not very good and you want to talk to a nice person, just talk to Caroline. We also would like to thank our hosts, Don Breeze. We sure appreciate all of the support we've gotten in doing this. In particular, Reverend Max Lasser, thank you for hosting us, and we've been made to feel very welcome. And now I'm going to acknowledge someone who doesn't like to be acknowledged, my wife Evelyn. And she's the one who actually set this up. I believe she's taught a course here before. She's an energy healer. And forgive me if I'm not using the right terminology. She's intuitive. Is that right? Is that the way I did? Anyway, Evelyn's the one that came up with the idea of having me speak today. So she's responsible for doing that. And we also want to welcome online guests that we have from Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia, who we know are watching. Last but not least, we want to acknowledge Annie Dwyer, who is recording this today, and is it Cassari Web Solutions? Did I get that right? Cassari? Okay, Cassari Web Solutions. And she's recording the event, and she's our web provider, and she's done a great job in helping us do that. All right, let's get started. Let's go to the first slide. I'm not sure if you remember this newspaper article from October 22nd, 2011. Actually, that's the reason why we're speaking today. This came out in the local Tyler newspaper, and it says, Guidance from the Beyond, and it's got a picture of Arlene Gregg. Does people here know Arlene Gregg? Okay. Well, it's a real nice picture of Arlene, and I read it, and I think it's a fairly reasonable and balanced article. But what really caught my eye was the Reverend Anthony McLaughlin from a local Catholic church who said the following concerning her and her skills. There's one of two options. She's either a con artist not talking to anyone, or it's something that's not from God. Now I'm just quoting you. I've never met Miss Reverend McLaughlin, so I don't know anything about him, so I'm just what he said. It could be a spirit masquerading as someone's grandmother. That's how they could get that kind of information. The devil knows things that we don't. So there is a conflict between some of the things that you're experiencing and the way that the church perceives, or some Christian churches perceive some of the skills that someone like Ms. Gray possesses. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to show you the connection between the Bible and perhaps some of the things that you understand and experience that maybe you've never seen before. Well, we're going to find that it's not in the New Testament, it's in the Old Testament. We're going to talk about the cosmic connection between a human being and the cosmos. Next slide, please. These are individuals that many of you have seen before. We have David Wilcock, Nassim Haramein, Drunvalo Melchizedek, Cyndi Dale, Alex Collier, and Amit Goswami. Now, show of hands, who's heard of at least one of these people that I've listed here? Just give me a show of hands that you've seen them before. So, a large number of people. Here's what I'm going to show you today. I'm not going to say anything about all of the things that they believe, but I'm going to take quotes on things that they believe, and I'm going to tell you, but I'm not going to prove it today, that the statements they make can be validated in the Bible. Let's go to the next slide, please. Amit Goswami is a quantum physicist, and he is pioneering a new paradigm called the science within consciousness. Next slide. He says that we can't predict anything, the movement of anything. All we can talk about are probabilities of occurrence. Now, this is not just a theory, it's a fact. The only thing that we know about anything is probabilities and possibilities when it comes to how things move. Next slide. Then he says if we choose to accept this, then the question immediately becomes, who, what chooses among these possibilities to bring the actual of the event of experience? So what quantum physicists are seeing is that it appears like there's one thing that's choosing the destiny of the universe, and what we're living at is a range of possibilities. That's very interesting, isn't it? Next slide, please. How about Cyndi Dale? Are you familiar with her work on the subtle body? A number of people have seen that. It's a wonderful book on the subtle energy in a human body. She says the physical body and its DNA rely upon light for health. I agree with that. Next slide. The light proceeds into the body's crystalline matrix or fiber optic network by moving from the rods and cones into a different set of cells called the Mueller cells. The light accesses the crystal matrix of the body to reach to every part of the body. That is a biblical statement that she's making. Next slide. The heart, it turns out, is made between 60 and 60% of the cells are neural, in other words, they're brain cells, identical to those present in the brain. A lot of people don't know they have brain cells in their heart. Next slide. Studies at the University of Kassel in Germany in 1997, the heart emanated a sustained light of 100,000 photons per second. So the heart emits light. Again, this is something that a lot of Christians don't know. Next slide. Drunvalo Melchizedek from the Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. The human body is a hologram of the universe and contains the same principles. Now, for those who are from Shomerei Hamashal here, just give me a nod of your head. Do we talk about the body being a model of the cosmos? Just nod your head. That's what we teach. Just like what he's saying here. Next slide, please. The earth was without form until it came back out of the void, out of nothing, is exactly what the Egyptians believed. It's also what many other religions believe. So different people can say the same true thing, right? The sky's blue. Does it matter where that comes from? No. Well, because the Egyptians said it, we shouldn't be listening to it. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. That's bias, prejudice. What's really interesting is that from an entirely different source, the Egyptians, comes exactly the same description of the cosmos that we teach at Shomerei Hamashal Institute. It's identical. And it's supported by the Bible. Next slide. Nassim Haramein. Who here is familiar with Nassim Haramein's work? There is, in Abydos, Egypt, on the Osirian temple, a figure of the flower of life that's etched into rock that looks like it's been burned in by a laser. Did you know that? And that this artifact is very, very old. Now, is that the sort of thing that you'd expect the Egyptians would have known many thousands of years ago? No. So how do we account from that, from a religious belief? How do we account for that by just looking at the Bible? That has to be answered. Oh, no, you went too, sorry, go back, please, page up. Here's the next one. When you take a survey picture from a satellite at the apex of the Grand Pyramid in Giza, it's only 1/4 inch off center, and its total area covers 13 square acres, and there's 2.3 million stones on it. Is there any technology we possess today that would allow us to do a similar construction? No, there isn't. So how does my belief as a Christian, as a theologian, whatever it is, how do I account for the fact that these things, now, I could choose to ignore it. I could put the blinders on and say, I'm not going to see this. Yeah, but that's not right, is it? Would you agree with me that's not right? Our God has to account for all of this. And the message that we have in our Bible has to account for all this. And it's doing us no good to say the only way we can get truth is put the blinders on and ignore something that's staring us right in the face. Now, I want to emphasize something and say it to you again. The Bible backs up every one of these statements. Backs up everything. Next slide. Now, this man, Alex Collier, claims that he was abducted by Andromedan aliens when he was 8 years old. Have you ever heard of, who's heard of Alex Collier? Raise your hand. You people. He makes a statement which is 100% correct. He said that you're made of color, light, and sound. You can establish that from the first 6 books of the Bible, by the way. He's absolutely correct. Have you ever heard that from a Bible expositor before? You shake your head if you've heard that before, or shake your head if you've never heard that. Can we establish this, Ray?
Yes, we can.
Absolutely we can. He's absolutely correct. Next slide. Our life has to do with the advancement of the soul. Absolutely correct statement. Now, I don't know about all the rest about Mr. Collier. I don't know if he was abducted by aliens when he was 8 years old. I don't know if he's been talking to the Andromedan aliens. I can't confirm any of those things. I do know those 2 statements are true. Where he got it from, I don't know. But he's absolutely right. Next slide. David Wilcock probably has been more instrumental for me personally in increasing my understanding of what's available in the scientific community than any one single person. Now, who here has heard of David Wilcock? Lots of folks have. Okay. He talks about the DNA phantom effect. Are you familiar with the DNA phantom effect? Okay, you have a leaf, and then it's charged with energy, You move the leaf and there's still an image of the leaf, and they're separated by a distance. So the phantom effect is attributed to DNA. Again, this can be absolutely supported by what's taught in the first 6 books of the Bible. Next slide. Oh, I want to mention something else. Also, you can take a strand of DNA, they can see the photons spiraling around it. You can remove the DNA and the photons spiral for 30 days around the same spot.
Wow.
Does that match anything that you've heard from biblical expositors saying, yeah, I agree with that, it makes perfect sense to me? Maybe not. Here's another one. There's a young man in England, as I understand it, according to David Wilcock, who has an IQ of 126 and 44% of his brain volume has been lost. He's a mathematician. How is that possible? Next slide. Nikolai Kozyrev has found that the flow of time does not push through space in a straight line, but it bends, it twists, it spins as it moves along. Time possesses not only energy but rotation, which it can transmit to a system. Russian scientists call these waves of time torsion fields. I prefer to use the term source field. Absolutely 100% can be verified from the first 6 books of the Bible. Next slide. Nope, sorry, you got to go back up. Aaron, please. The material of the universe is built primarily of photons. That's true. Next slide. The universe is divided into 2 parallel realities. That's true. Next slide. The atoms over there are inside out. That's true. That can be established. Next. It's a very big consciousness shift to imagine time and space are the same stuff. Time and space are the same thing. That can be established from the first 6 books of the Bible. And quantum physicists are establishing the same thing. Next slide. Information can be instantly located anywhere else in the universe. Now, I have to thank Evelyn for this. Have you heard about the experiments where they separate 2 strands of DNA by 80 miles? You've heard of this, and they put an atomic clock beside them, and the information is transmitted instantly from one end to the other. Now, an atomic clock will track anything in time. It divides a second into 9.2 billion parts. So how is it possible that one part of the DNA instantly knows what the other part of the DNA is doing? Doesn't fit any of the current physics, does it? I agree with what you say. Next. Okay, so here's what the problem is. Now we're going to talk about why we are where we are. Maybe we're going to talk about why Reverend McLaughlin believes what he does. I'm not sure. Here's the mistake. You can't interpret the Bible from the New Testament. You have to interpret it from the Old. Now let me repeat that. You cannot interpret the Bible from the New Testament. You have to interpret it from the Old. The Old has to be comprehensively interpreted, and then you interpret the New. If you do it the opposite direction, you will get it wrong. Is it your responsibility to interpret the first 6 books of the Bible? What do you think? Is that your responsibility? No, it's not. It's my responsibility. So how do you know I'm not telling you big pack of lies? How do you know? Right? I'm dressed pretty sharply today. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, well that's because of Annie. Okay, I wouldn't normally dress like this. Do I dress like this normally? No. I'm a sandal guy.
He even got a haircut for you.
Yeah, I got a haircut yesterday for this. Okay, no. Okay, so maybe I'm just selling you something. I got a pretty good smile too, right? Get you all ginned up and just tell you all sorts of facts and figures and wave my arm and you all believe. How do you know I'm telling you the truth? It's actually very easy. Next. This is a picture of an automobile. Okay. When you go and you want to know something about an automobile, do you go to a guy and he just tells you a bunch of say, oh, that's good enough for me, where do I sign up? No. You want him to explain how the whole thing works, right? You're able to tell whether he knows the truth by him knowing all the parts of that automobile and how they all work. So all you got to do is figure out if he can give you a comprehensive interpretation of what that vehicle does and how it works. So that's all you have to do. And then you do that every day when you go and buy stuff, right? Okay. If someone can't give you a comprehensive interpretation of the first 6 books of the Bible, I wouldn't believe anything they say. I wouldn't listen to them. Stop right away. Just say, if your church can't provide that, sorry, I'm not listening. Because if that's not the case, I could make up anything. And if I had the right outfit, I could convince you of it. Especially if I look like your favorite cousin. Right? They have to be able to give you a comprehensive interpretation of Genesis to Joshua. If they can't do that, don't listen. Stop listening. That's what I'm offering to you. Everything is based off the first 6 books. It is a cohesive word structure that can only be interpreted one way. And the Hebrew sages knew this, the rabbis knew this, they've known this for thousands of years. I cannot tell you how many disagreements that we get into when we talk to Christians who want to see Jesus in absolutely everything in the Old Testament, and you get 5 or 6 different things to explain the same thing. They can't all be right. But remarkably, the Hebrew scholars were able to get virtually only one interpretation of what's in the first 6 books, and that forces the interpretation of the New Testament, and that's what I do with Mr. Burkett. Now, Mr. Case is here now. By the way, Mr. Case, will you please stand up just very quickly? Ed writes the documentation for Shomerei Hamashal. Ed, how many pages are we up to now? We're up to about 500 pages on essentially on the first 6 books. She wants you to stand up. Okay, next please. Okay, this is a picture of the menorah. I want to help you out. Let's say you've got someone who comes to you and they claim that they know something about the Bible. You got this nice menorah. Here's some questions I would like you to ask them. Okay? Why is this sitting on dirt? Now, do you have to know the answer to that question? No. This is what you're going to ask the person who claims to know something about the Bible. Why is it sitting on dirt? Why is it made of gold? Why does it have 6 branches? Why is it shaped like a plant? Why did they have to light it? Why does the light only go northward in one direction? Why did they cover it in a blue cloth when they transported it from one place to another? See what their answer is. If they can't give you definitive answers that is comprehensively interprets everything that's in the first part, then they don't know what they're talking about. That's your immediate sign to walk away. Next. So here's a statement in Revelation. It says, the one who walks among the 7 golden lampstands, and Christians would understand that this is Jesus Christ, right? How can you claim to know anything about Jesus Christ when you don't know anything about the menorah? can. You can. That just doesn't make any sense, right? You could just make it up. Next, please. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you a few simple things from the comprehensive interpretation of the first 6 books of the Bible. You're made of 4 parts. The first part is called neshama. It's a type of spirit. The second part is a soul. It's a nephesh. The third part is an aphor, dust. And the fourth part is called arom, and it is nakedness. You're made of 4 parts. Every human being is made of 4 parts. Life, he, is only associated with neshama. It's what enlivens you. That's it. That's what you're made of. Next slide. And again. Okay. Let me clear up something, and I'm going to be a little critical. So I haven't been very critical on the metaphysics folks, so I got to be a little critical. I've been really hard on the Christians. Would you agree I've been hard on the Christians today? Okay, so the metaphysical folks, you're going to have to get a little as well. It's kind of fragmented. Would you agree? There's no structure to it. Would you agree? It's kind of this person says this and that person says that, and you can't connect them. Personally, I don't think that's acceptable. Now, here's the good news. The structures within the Old Testament, within the first 6 books, allows you to do that. So, this is a King James version of Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7, and I've seen this quoted by metaphysics folks. For as a man he thinketh in his heart, so is he. So it's like heart thinking, right? Are you familiar with this verse? How many people are familiar with this verse and they've seen that before? Okay, so what you think it says is that the heart thinks, right? And if you look at the work by David Wilcock, then it seems to be true, doesn't it? Because they've got brain cells in there, right? Flat wrong. Absolutely wrong. Because it lacks a comprehensive interpretation of the first 6 books. I'm going to show you what it actually says next. This is the New American Standard Bible Translation. For as he thinks within himself, so he is. It's a little better. By the way, the word heart is never there. It's not there. It actually says, like he sha'ard in his soul, so is he. So actually the word for soul is there, not heart. And the heart is not the soul. They're two totally separate things. They're related to each other, but they're separate. Oh, sir. Take us back up again. Scotty, we need more power to the engines.
That's normal for there, though. He shorts out.
No, that's not it. That's not it. Just go page up, page up. Yeah. No, you just advanced it. Okay. Okay, there we go. We're good. That's good. Stay right there, please. Okay, I want to stop there for a second. What is the human connection to the cosmos? It's your soul. Where do human souls come from? It comes from the earth. The word sha'ar means a gate. And by the way, it's the word that's used for the gate to the courtyard of the tabernacle that was in the wilderness. By definition, a gate's always open. That word only occurs as a verb in that one place. The soul is the portal to the other side where Jesus Christ is. and your soul is your way of connecting to that. And that's the teaching that I wanted to leave with you today. You can then go back and begin to see how that one little part begins to connect to everything else in the story of Yahweh, because what God is doing is telling His story to you. And then He's telling how you're a part of it. And what He's doing is repeating what He's done throughout the cosmos for billions of years. Not only here, but other places and other times. The soul is the portal to the other side. And that's what its function is. The soul is what you are. It is your identity marker that makes you what you are. Spirit is not. You don't possess spirit. You share it with a bunch of other folks. Spirit is what allows things to be connected. But the soul is specific and particular to you. It's the portal to the spirit side of the universe. Do you see how specific and exact we can be when we describe this? Now, we at Shomerei Hamashal are more than willing to answer how everything else connects to the cosmos as well, but the soul is the primary part that you need to know about. That's all I have, and what I'd like to do is, if you have some questions, I'm willing to answer them. But if you don't have any questions, we thank you very much for inviting us, and we hope this has been very helpful to you.
Does anyone have a question they'd like Dr. Wall?
Yes.
You have it written down, please?
Yes.
Do you want to just ask it?
No. Why don't you hand it up, and that way we'll read it out so everyone can see it. Okay, so how do you know that the person can give you a comprehensive view of the first 6 books of the Bible without lying? Okay. It's real simple. In the example I've got in the video, someone, let's say we took let's go back to the car example. Let's stop right there. Okay. Let's say you've never seen a car before, and you're in the deepest, darkest parts of Africa. And someone comes along and says that these little rubber round things here are used to lift the car off the ground. Would that make sense to you? Then he would go, oh, let me show. And he'd go up to the car, he'd let the air of the tires and the whole thing would go down. It would make sense, right? The point is, it made sense in isolation from an explanation of all the rest of it. If you isolate the car's form and function, you can make up anything. But if you require this person to tell you how that part fits with all the rest of it, you get a comprehensive explanation of what it is. It has to fit with everything else. Because the first thing you're going to notice is that there's a metal piece that goes between the two rubber things, right? And then there's a part that runs up the center. And you'll notice that a gear connects it to this thing that's in here, and so on and so forth. It has to tell a comprehensive story that all has to fit together. And if it doesn't, then you know it's not correct. You have to provide a detailed, integrated explanation of what it is. So I'm going to tell you right now what it is. It's a story of Yahweh. It's a story of God. Now it's got to fit. And if it doesn't fit and doesn't tell God's story, it's not right. That's how you know.
We have another question.
Yeah, you can read it. Can you read Hebrew?
Oh, is that what you're talking about?
You may not have heard what she said. She says, oh, is that what you're talking about, reading Hebrew?
How does the soul come from the earth? Great question. Has anyone got a Bible? Okay. Okay. Ray, can you confirm in Genesis chapter 1 that the soul comes from the earth? Okay. Why don't we let Ray look it up? It says so in Genesis chapter 1. Let Ray pull it up and
I
then
have to put my.
He's got to put his eyes
he's
on
got
it.
to put his eyes on it.
Do you have a specific place you'd like to go?
Yeah, just when talks about creatures that are created, and then it essentially says the soul comes from the earth. It should be about midway through Genesis. On the sixth day. Just
Verse, let the earth, verse 24 says, let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creatures, beasts of the earth. Verse 26, then Elohim God said, let us make man in our own image according to our likeness. Let them rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the creeping things.
okay, so the first part says, let the earth produce living souls. Comes from the earth.
So it's the earth that produces all the souls.
Right. Again, these are well understood by the Hebrew sages.
Does
Is there
that
any
mean
other
also animals have souls?
The animals have them, and
Oh, wow.
all the land creatures. Are you saying the soul is your connection to God? It's your personal connection to God, yes. You're connected to God in many ways, but it's your personal connection to God that's particular to you. That's correct. Something that's very interesting is that if you look at the first 6 books of the Bible, and of course the tabernacle and its rituals are a very important part of that, they were very focused on the nephesh, the soul. They were very focused on the destiny of their soul, their nephesh. They weren't as bothered or focused on the human body, by the way.
Yeah, so were the Egyptians.
So were the Egyptians.
Yes, they were. Matter of fact, if you do a lot of research, you will find that most religions around the world have almost a carbon copy identification of the Hebrew text, and even the stories match. American Indians, Mayans, Hopi, Aztec, Egyptian, even the Nordic people. There are many documents to prove that. And not only do we work on the idea that to affirm it by the text of the Hebrew text, we've also done massive amount of research on all the religions of the world. So that what's interesting is how these stories start to match each other. Matter of fact, the Egyptian bronze book is almost verbatim on the creation of Canal. So when you're told, well, don't look at any of that, that'll lead you to a wrong interpretation. Well, when you add that in to life as we see it, a lot of times when you're discussing this with someone with a theological background, they'll cling to something. They say, okay, the creation is only 6,000 years old, as they know it. Then what do we do with all the documents and the tablets that were dug up of the Sumerian text that are approximately 25,000 years old, that records history, and it's all fantasy and made up? Is it some fiction book that the Sumerians decided that all their experts would write? Or what about the hieroglyphics that are recorded in Egypt that's all made up? Or they just decided they'd record all this fiction and not real life? Well, Okay, let's talk about the Mayans. They did the same thing, the Aztecs, the American Indians, and we could go down a complete list of all those histories. So we're going to malign everybody and say they're heretics. They didn't record history accurately. They're making all this up. What an interesting story. So what would make that any different than this text? Is it a made-up story? You see where this is going? So what we affirm is the reality of our creation has a human element that didn't intentionally set out to write mysterious fictional stories. These are real-life events of the people that recorded this. Now, you could call it the inerrant Word of God, and we've had this discussion. Last night we had a pretty heated discussion, and I was involved in that discussion, and I'm okay with that. So anyway, the literal sense is that God is doing things that we don't completely know if we don't have a substantial something to give us a foundation. So now that foundation in what God has promised, which is the gospel, is in the Hebrew text. So when you go back to the foundation of that Hebrew text, that's what we build all of our theology on. If it does not connect and you can't align it with the facts that are in Scripture, then your interpretation for whatever the New Testament is becomes skewed in an idea that you just what you think it may be. So who decided that? You, me, Barack Obama, Putin? Who? It has to be measured by what we believe is the foundation of the truth. And that's established in the first 6 books of the Hebrew text. If you go outside that, you can't align it. Matter of fact, a lot of the teachings, metaphysical teachings, Egyptian, whomever, it lines right up with the creative account in the Hebrew text. It's fascinating, actually. So does science. And Dr. Wong and I do this every day. Matter of fact, we spend probably more time on this than we do our business of making money. And our employees will tell you, probably so. So, our focus is what Dale was talking to you today about is not to be deceptive. It is to found a truth that we can say our God is involved in this creation. And He is the creator, eldest creator of all things. And we can back up science, everything else with this text. And it's fascinating and enlightening as well.
Any other questions?
So what's the best book to buy to read those first 6 books out of? Which translation of?
There is not one that you can find.
That's what you
In
keep
the
saying, but
English.
you gotta read about something.
In the English.
So the question is, what book could you buy that would be the best one to help you to interpret the first 6 books of the Bible?
The
Right.
interlineal?
Okay, so here's the answer to that. God created a world where people speak different languages. So English just happens to be one of them. What you can see when you interpret the first 6 books is that it was made to be translated into a different language. Does it make sense that Hebrew would be the only language that could understand the first 6 books of the Bible? That doesn't make sense, does it? Okay. So what that means is that the exercise of translating forces you to look at the form and function of the words that are written, and what you find is that there are structures in the Hebrew text. And the structure forces even more the interpretation that has to align up with the way that it's structured. And a very common theme of the structure is called chiasm, and chiastic structure. For example, the Noahic flood account. Genesis chapter 6 to Genesis chapter 9 is a massive chiastic structure. You have to honor the structure when you interpret it. If you don't honor it, you're not going to understand it. And we've taught the Noah flood account from the chiastic structure point of view at Shomerei Hamashal. It's a thing of beauty when you look at it. It's lost in any translation. It's lost. So what we've done is we've gone around to a bunch of folks and we've forced them to be, everyone to be interpreters of the Bible. Well, can everyone here translate Hebrew into English? Okay, show of hands, how many people do you here can confidently translate Hebrew into English? Raise your hand. You're just really, really confident. Not a person. Does it make sense that God would make it so that that would be the case? Does it make sense that we would all be turned into interpreters? No. Doesn't make any sense at all. So what God does is He provides an interpreter. I volunteer. And what you have to do is prove me a liar. Or prove me true. Pick one. So the question is, if I can't give you a comprehensive interpretation, if Shomerei Hamashal cannot give you a comprehensive interpretation, if the Baptists, the Mormons, pick one, they can't give you a competent interpretation, walk away, because they're not telling you the truth. Now, I'm not saying they're deliberately lying. I'm just saying that that's the way that you test it. And it's no different if you go on to buy a house. Would you just look at the house and go, yeah, it looks all right. Where do you want me to sign the check? No. You're going to go through that house and check it all out and make sure it's all right, right? If that makes sense in what you do when you make a purchase, why would you accept someone randomly just giving you some idea of what the first 6 books say? It doesn't make any sense, does it? So what we do in our teaching is that we show again and again and again. And what happens is once you see this enough, you start seeing the patterns and the rhythm coming. And you can almost anticipate what you're about to hear next. Because the story just keeps repeating itself again and again. It's the cosmic story. It's the story of God. And that's how you know it's right. Another question is, what do you say about God does not do anything, God is everything? Okay. I'm dying to know who made it, but I'm not going to do that. It's a great question. We'll have to be more specific. In the beginning of the universe is L. And L manifests the universe through Eloah. And what he projected was a thought. But the manifestation was through Eloah, and Eloah is Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ really does manifest everything. That's the answer to the question. It's a great question. One of the things that confuses many Christians is that the veil is Christ's flesh in the tabernacle structure. The manifestation of the cosmos comes from Jesus Christ. And so, this is actually a true statement. It's a very good question. Thank you for asking me. We could go into a lot more on that. Yes?
I just heard you say the veil is Christ's flesh.
Yeah, that's what it says in Hebrews.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So what happens is that the universe is manifested by Jesus Christ. But the thought is from God. And there is a very direct and definite teaching that we have at Shomerei Hamashal that talks about how light is separated from darkness, how things are made, and they all relate to the tabernacle structure and the manifestation of how thought occurs. It's called Elohim Hashaving. It talks about how the objects in the holy spaces are made in the Mikdash. And all of these things all fit together and line up. And then you have to take that to the New Testament, and it restricts the New Testament interpretation. So once you understand the first 6 books of the Bible, you go to the New Testament, someone says something about that, you go, I've looked at the car. I know how the car works. So if you want to hook this trailer up to it, nah, that doesn't make any sense. So you can't make up the New Testament. It forces you to only interpret things in a particular way. And that's where a lot of the discussions that I have with Ray is going back and forth, but it's always from the Old Testament. It's never from the New Testament. That's the mistake. We call it a backward interpretation. I hope that answers the question. We could spend hours on that particular one because it talks about how the universe is made. Ray knows there's a lot more. We can talk about that. It's a great question, by the way. But that'll have to suffice for now. Is there any other questions?
To you.
What is the purpose of our soul? And to the menorah 7 lights. It sits on soil, it's grounded, and it says unity would say 12 powers, not sure what that says, 7 something else.
I was just thinking about the 7 lights, and as if I was looking at them, you might call them powers or lights within ourselves or whatever. The main ones, like in the menorah.
Right.
And I'm just wondering how you would, you said that it was on the ground, so it's on the soil in the soul, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I don't want to assume, so that's why I was asking you. And, in the 5, in the sutras, we would call them the 5 places within the body, the points of light. And so I was just my mind is running now, having a good time.
Okay, so this is where we need each other. Because some of you experience things I don't experience, and that's your function in the body. So we would like you to join the body. Because you have powers, you have abilities, everyone has abilities. I just happen to interpret the Bible. So I know how to figure out Hebrew word structures. That's it. That's all I do. Apart from that, I dress good, but that's fine. Okay. Only when Annie tells me. So I look at everything in terms of a function. Okay. We have a massive teaching on the menorah, but here's some things that need to be answered. First of all, it's coming out of the earth, so the earth is providing it. The second thing is that the gold is spirit.
Oh, and gold does not deteriorate.
Doesn't deteriorate, and
So
neither
the
does
soul
spirit.
doesn't deteriorate either then.
Right. But the gold is spirit. The silver is soul. The copper is body, or flesh. It's clean spirit. The word for pure is the same word for clean. And when the holy anointing oil touches it, it's holy clean spirit. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. It produces ma'or, which is the separated light from darkness as described in the fourth day. That light only shines in one direction. It shines towards the north, towards the bread table. The ma'or comes from or. The or is the light that's separated from darkness in day one. So it's not or light, it's ma'or, it's from light. It's made like a plant. The word for plant is aura. It's the feminine for or. The menorah is the earth's response to light. It produces light. The heavens ask, the earth provides. What Yahweh's looking for is something new. You're new. Thought was projected in the first moment. It went out into the universe, and now he wants to bring it back in infinite expressions and varieties. He doesn't want us all to be the same. Have you noticed we're all different? He doesn't want uniform pews and people all being the same. He wants us all different. We are the manifestation of those differences. These parts are called Canal. Canal is the spot from the elbow to the shoulder. It's not the cubit, which goes from the elbow to here. It's not the doing, it's the origin of doing. Yahweh is called, or El is called the Canal of the heavens and the earth. And so is Melchizedek. And that's who they lift their arm to. Canal is the conception in a mother's womb. There's 7 canals. These are thighs. They're connected. They're green spots that come out of the earth. The thigh of a plant is equivalent to our thigh, except it doesn't move. Does that make sense? This moves in a light path. This does. This thinks. And this purifies. If we go to the tabernacle structure, the boards are called ribs. The top parts are called shoulders. The human body is a model of the cosmos.
The inner parts are called the what? Liver?
Yeah, liver and kidney. It's parts that purify. It's a model of the human body. It's also a model of the universe turned inside out. And it's also a model of the first days of creation turned inside out. Reversed. So all of these things would have to be answered if you were to answer something about the menorah. The menorah's functionality relative to everything else has to be explained.
That's saying, may I interrupt? I mean, so that's really saying that is a representation for what is also going on inside you.
Yes.
And that everything is turned inside out in a sense.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And yes, sir. And that's what we need.
That's
what we need your help with, because that's what you and a lot of the folks here, you know all about that. You know about chakras. I don't have a clue about chakras. I'm just an interpreter.
But you do, which is why I'm calling them other things.
Right.
And that's what I was getting at.
Right.
I just wanted to, when you were saying that, and then you left the menorah, I went, it's grounded, it has this and this and this, and that's why I just wanted you to do what you just did, because that's exactly what I live with inside of I'm inside out as much as the
Yes.
next guy, and it just, yeah, I've never looked at it that way. Thank you.
Right.
But I wanted to hear you say it, because it pulled it back into a reality for me. Thank you.
Yes. What's exciting is it's all woven into the story of God himself. So we are his story. He's writing his story to us. So the narration is actually God narrating his own story.
When we say, well, this is within everything and within all that is, and it's within you as your light, if you will.
Yes.
That's just my way of saying that, to simplify. But and that never goes out, and that the soul is a continuous unfolding expression of infinite. And that soul I have always been and always will be and cannot be taken away.
Does that sound familiar?
That's exactly what I teach. You always have been.
Does he argue with you?
He usually loses.
Oh.
Dale, we actually have an online question.
Okay.
One of the online viewers has posted a question, and
All right.
it's from Luke, and he wants to know, how does reading one sentence from the Bible prove that the soul comes from the earth?
It doesn't. That's a very good question. So here's what's happening. I've just described the side mirror on the car and said it's a side mirror. And then you're saying, liar, liar, pants on fire. Absolutely true. So here's what I'm going to do. You're going to have to hear the rest of the story, Luke. Sorry. Because here's the thing. You have to be persuaded yourself. And the only way you're going to be persuaded is when you get the picture of the whole car, right? Okay, so it could be a side mirror. It could be something else. So that's actually a great question. Don't allow someone to make one statement and then say it's right. You're going to have to verify
I'd
it.
like to inject something here.
Yes.
In the discussions that we've had, our friendship started almost 6 years ago. And it started with Dr. Wong's 360-day, ancient 360-day book. Now, our talks were very intense discussions. And but the objective was we both knew there were flaws in what we believed, but we couldn't figure out why. So we literally, our friendship started, then we separated our ways for about a year, and we came back and started talking about what we were discovering and what we were seeing and how God was doing all this in our thought process and in our relationship. So we have spent hundreds of hours with these discussions about back and forth of what the foundation of Scripture is and how to connect the New Covenant writings to the Old Covenant writings and how they melded together, and contemporary Christianity had not done that. What it had done was it built a foundation on its own standing and not a foundation based on the Hebrew text. So without that foundation, he and I both were wrong. So you can imagine the argument we wound up in. So we began to really go back, restructure, and put it together, and we started seeing things and were shown things by God's Holy Spirit, who is the ultimate teacher, who resides in you as the teacher. So now when we agreed on that, then the teaching became very fast, broad, and was clarifying itself. We didn't have to do the work. The text did the work for us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I want to add something to what Ray just said, and I think it's also very important for you to understand, is the Hebrew sages, the Hebrew teachers that taught, that have been accepted for hundreds or thousands of years in interpreting things like Leviticus and Numbers or whatever, they're right. They're right. Their interpretation is correct. There's very little variation in that interpretation. So what has normally happened is we've taken the New Testament theologians and they have applied their thinking on the teaching of the Hebrew sages, and that's been the problem. So if you go to great interpreters like people like Jacob Milgram, for example, there's almost no variation in our interpretation of the first 6 books of the Bible from Dr. Milgram's work. But then when you take it to the New Testament, obviously that's something they don't do and they haven't done. And that's where Ray's work comes in. Is there any other questions? Oh, I should just mention, I wrote a book back in 2006 called The Ancient 360-Day Year. It's available for purchase if you would like at the back through Caroline Powers. And what the book is about is about all of the ancient people kept a 360-day year calendar. The Persians, the Mayans, the ancient Chinese, they all kept a 300, and they based it on astronomical observations. And suddenly it changed. So what the book talks about is how the Old Testament explains how that change occurred, and what we now have a 365 and a quarter day year. So if you're interested in knowing more about it, you can purchase the book at the back through Caroline. Is that okay? Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Dr. Wong. Thank you to all of you who have come from, say the name of the institute.
Shomerei Hamashal Institute.
Thank you. Thank you. And the live stream video that's been going on throughout is going to be available on their website. There will be a link in my newsletter. In the next newsletter that comes up, there'll be a link so you can watch this and send it on to any of your friends. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your donations today. Thank you for your attendance. It was a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you.